I recently faced my own worst nightmare. The entitled HOA president sent security to tear down my fence at my ranch. And their excuse? They said it was community maintenance. Funny thing is, the only thing maintained that day was my property line and a perfectly timed headbutt. Let me start from the beginning. Two grown men were crawling, not the sneaky, tactical crawl you see in movies. This was the miserable, painful crawl of two people whose legs had suddenly decided to stop working. One of them, a stout man with a security logo on his polo shirt, was dragging his right leg behind him like a broken tree branch. The other, slightly thinner, and with a look of pure shock on his face, was trying to use his elbows to pull himself toward a white commercial van parked at the edge of my gravel driveway. Every few feet, he would stop, gasp, and look back over his shoulder, not at me, but at a 200-pound ball of wool and fury currently munching placidly on a patch of clover. I stood on my porch, the cordless phone pressed to my ear, watching the whole pathetic scene unfold under the gray evening sky. 911. What's your emergency? The dispatcher's voice said, calm and professional. I took a deep breath, matching her tone. My name is Nathan Reed. I'm at 142, Stone River Lake Road. Based on presentation, likely closed tib-fib fractures, I said. I need an ambulance, maybe two. I have two adult males with apparent closed fractures to their lower extremities. Both are conscious and alert, but in significant pain. No bone through skin that I can see. I added, copy that, she said. Any weapons present? Just my porch bat, I said. It's a raccoon chaser. I'm not using it. A goat hoof clacked on the rail. Benny leaned down and bleated into the speaker. Was that a goat? 3 of them, I said. All unarmed. A beat. Sir, is the animal that struck the man still nearby? Samson looked up, mouth full of clover, like a judge at lunch. He's a domestic ram. Come now. I have him. Keep your distance from the suspects, she said. Advise them not to move. I raised my voice. Fellas, stay still. Help's coming. Do not stand. The thinner one panted. He keeps staring at me. He's chewing, I said. That's how he looks when he chews. Scout and Willow shifted to heel on my left and right like two little bodyguards. Ma'am, I'm putting you on speaker. I'm going to start first aid. I could hear the click of her keyboard. Sir, can you tell me what happened? I looked from the crawling men to Samson, my domestic ram, who let out a soft bleat and went back to his snack. My 2 border collies, Scout and Willow, sat perfectly still on either side of me, their heads cocked, as if watching the most interesting tennis match of their lives. The 3 dwarf goats were on the porch railing, looking down with what I could only describe as judgmental curiosity. Ma'am, I said, my voice as dry as a dusty rodeo arena. It's a little complicated. One gentleman appears to have slipped and fallen on my boat dock stairs. The other seems to have had a dynamic disagreement with my livestock. A brief pause on the other end. He had a what with your livestock? I leaned against the porch post, the old wood cool against my shoulder. A dynamic disagreement. It happens. My primary concern right now is providing aid. Can you confirm paramedics are en route? I used my old rodeo medic voice, the one that cuts through panic. It always worked. Yes, sir. Ambulance is on its way. The sheriff's department has also been dispatched. Are you in any danger? I looked at the 2 men who had now reached their van and were struggling with the door handles. They looked less like a threat and more like a failed slapstick comedy routine. Samson, the source of half the problem, was now scratching one of his big curled horns against a fence post. No, ma'am, I said. The situation is under control. The perpetrators of what my lawyer will likely refer to as alleged animal gang activity have been pacified. Another pause, longer this time. Animal gang activity? I could hear the confusion, but I didn't elaborate. I'm going to render first aid until your people get here. I'm putting you on speaker now, I said, setting the cordless on the rail as I moved. I walked down the porch steps, my worn leather boots making soft sounds on the damp grass. I wasn't armed. The old wooden baseball bat I'd been holding was leaning against the house right where I'd left it. It was just a deterrent, a visual aid to encourage polite conversation. It was never meant to be used. As I got closer to the van, the first man looked up at me, his face pale with pain and fury. You're crazy. Your psycho sheep broke my leg. I knelt beside him, my movements slow and deliberate. Technically, he's a ram, and his name is Samson. Now, let me see that leg. Moving it is a bad idea. We need to stabilize it before the pros get here. He flinched as I got closer, but the pain won out over the anger. He let me look. It was a bad break, a classic tib-fib, The kind I'd seen 100 times when a bull rider got hung up and stomped. The other man, the one who had taken a tumble on the dock stairs, was propped against a tire, cradling his own mangled shin. His injury was just as severe. I did what I could, which was mostly just talking to them, keeping them calm, and making sure they didn't do anything stupid like try to stand up. The whole time, I could feel the weight of the question hanging in the air. How did we get here? How did my quiet life on this lakefront ranch me little slice of stubborn, non-HOA compliant paradise turn into a scene with broken bones, trespassing security guards, and a ram with a sudden taste for vigilante justice? It all started, as these things so often do, with a knock on the door and a woman with a clipboard and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. It started with a disagreement over a few feet of dirt and a whole lot of pride. Before the crawling men and the 911 calls, there was just the quiet. That's what I bought the place for. After 15 years patching up cowboys as a rodeo medic, I'd had my fill of dust, noise, and people who thought getting thrown off a 2,000-pound animal was a viable career path. I wanted the sound of water lapping against a shore, the rustle of wind in the pines, and the low, contented noises of my own small herd. The ranch wasn't big, just 20 acres on the north shore of Stone River Lake. But it was perfect. It had a sturdy little house, a solid barn, and enough pasture for my crew. The best part, the thing that made me sign the papers without a second thought, was the deed. It was old, written in the kind of flowery legal language you don't see anymore. But one clause stood out, clear as day, a perpetual farm use exception. The property was a historic holdout, grandfathered in before the fancy Stone River Lake Homeowners Association ever existed. My land was on their map, a little island of agricultural reality in their sea of manicured lawns and matching mailboxes. But they couldn't touch me, or so I thought. My family here consisted of Samson, the aforementioned ram, who I'd raised from a bottle-fed lamb. He was mostly a gentle giant, but he had a protective streak a mile wide and a head like a cinder block. Then there were Scout and Willow, the border collies, smarter than half the people I knew and twice as loyal. And finally, the three dwarf goats, Benny, Otis, and Pip, whose main job was to be charmingly useless and get into trouble. We were a self-contained unit, a weird little family. My only real human connection out here was my best friend Alex, a guy I'd known since we were kids. He was a tech guy, lived in the city, and thought my version of paradise was a mosquito-infested wilderness with bad cell service. But he got it. He understood why I needed the space. He'd call me every few days. So, he'd say, "Has the goat uprising begun? Have they unionized yet?" "Not yet," I'd reply, watching Otis try to eat a welcome mat. "They're still in the early stages of planning." I suspect it's a classic case of unorganized animal gang activity. It was a running joke between us. For the first year, life was exactly what I'd hoped for. I worked as a farrier for the local farms, spending my days under horses, trimming and shoeing. It was hard, honest work that left my back aching but my mind clear. In the evenings, I'd sit on the dock with a cold beer, watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of orange and purple with Scout and Willow at my feet. The HOA was a distant concept, a newsletter that came in the mail that I used as kindling. I'd see the other residents out on their pontoon boats. Sometimes they'd wave, sometimes they wouldn't. I didn't care. I kept to myself, kept my fences mended, and my animals on my side of the line. Then Sharon Vance was elected HOA president. I hadn't paid much attention to the election. It was their business, not mine. But I started hearing things from my clients when I was out on calls. Whispers about new rules, stricter enforcement, a general tightening of the screws. Sharon was, by all accounts, a woman who believed the world would be a perfect place if everyone just did exactly what she said. She was all about maintaining property values and preserving community aesthetics, which were fancy ways of saying she wanted everything to look the same, sterile and beige. I saw her for the first time one Saturday morning. A sleek black SUV pulled up to the edge of my property line. A woman with sharp blonde hair, wearing white pants that had no business being on a ranch, got out and just stood there, staring. She had a clipboard. Nothing good ever comes from a person with a clipboard. She looked at my old, sturdy, but admittedly not beige fence. She looked at my dock, which was built for function, not for hosting wine and cheese parties. She looked at my barn, which had the audacity to look like a barn. Then her eyes landed on Samson, who was standing near the fence, watching her with his unnerving horizontal pupils. She wrinkled her nose as if she'd smelled something unpleasant. She made a note on her clipboard, got back in her SUV, and drove away. I didn't think much of it at the time. I figured she was just some bored HOA busybody taking in the local color. I had my deed. I had my exception. I was safe. Looking back, that was my first mistake. I underestimated her. I underestimated how much some people hate anything that's different, anything they can't control. And my little piece of heaven, with its goats and its ram and its refusal to be beige, was something Sharon Vance absolutely could not control. That clipboard wasn't for taking notes. It was for drawing battle lines. The first official move came a week later. It wasn't a sleek black SUV this time. It was Sharon Vance herself, walking right up my driveway like she owned the place. She had two men with her, both wearing the same polo shirts as the guys who would later end up crawling away from my porch. She was holding a rolled-up piece of paper like a scepter. I met her on the porch steps, motioning for Scout and Willow to sit, which they did instantly. Samson watched from the pasture, a silent, woolly sentinel. "Mr. Reed," she said, her voice crisp and overly sweet like cheap air freshener. "I'm Sharon Vance, president of the Stone River HOA. I know who you are," I said, keeping my voice level. "This is private property." She gave a little laugh, a sound that set my teeth on edge. "Actually, that's what we're here to discuss." She unrolled the paper. It was a printout of the HOA community map. "According to our official survey, a portion of your fence line and nearly all of your boat dock are encroaching on HOA common area." She pointed a perfectly manicured finger at a line on the map, specifically, this entire waterfront section. "It needs to be removed." I just stared at her. I'd lived here for over a year. My fence was where the old fence had always been. My dock was where the old dock had always been. "There must be a mistake," I said. "My property line runs to the high water mark. It's all in my deed." "Ah, yes, the deed," she said, her smile tightening. "We're aware of your unique situation. But HOA bylaws supersede outdated documents, especially when they impact community resources." That was the moment I knew this wasn't a simple misunderstanding. She didn't say your deed. She said outdated documents. She was dismissing the single most important legal paper defining my existence here. "That's not how property law works," I said calmly. "A recorded deed exception is legally binding. The HOA has no jurisdiction over my property." "We'll see about that," she snapped, her sugary facade cracking for a second. She then produced a handful of small, bright orange flags on thin wire stakes. Before I could react, her two helpers started walking along the shore, pushing them into my grass, about 20 feet inside my fence line. "This is the official boundary," she declared, as if saying it made it true. "You have 30 days to remove your fence and dock from this common area. If you fail to comply, we will have them removed for you, and you will be billed for the expense." I felt a slow burn start in my chest. This was my home, my sanctuary, and she was standing here planting flags in it, trying to steal my lakefront. "You're trespassing," I said, my voice low and hard. "You and your men need to leave my property. Now." She just smiled again. "The common area isn't your property, Mr. Reed." And with that, they turned and walked away, leaving a trail of ugly orange flags on my lawn. I called the sheriff's department. An hour later, a young deputy rolled up. I explained the situation, showed him my deed, pointed to the orange flags. He listened with a patient, tired expression. He walked over and looked at the flags. He looked at my deed. He looked back at me and sighed. "Look, sir," he said, "I understand you're upset, but from where I'm standing, this looks like a boundary dispute. That's a civil matter. She's claiming my land as HOA land," I argued. "Her people came onto my property without permission to plant those flags. That's trespassing." He shook his head. "She believes it's their land. It's your word against hers until a judge says otherwise. We can't get involved in civil disputes." My advice? Get a lawyer. He handed me my deed back, gave me a little nod, and got back in his car. I held my deed up to the porch cam. Farm use exception. Recorded at the county. Dusk came fast. My new motion lights clicked on, one by one, like runway lamps. A drone buzzed low over the pasture, wobbling in the wind. I lifted my flashlight and spoke to the phone mic. "Private property. You're being recorded." My handheld crackled. "Hank," from 2 coves over, a ham radio nut, came through. "Breaker, breaker. B-movie overheading your way." Willow gave 2 steady barks. Scout tracked the shadow. The drone dipped, caught my beam, and skittered toward the park shed by the path. A car door slammed, headlights snapped on, then rolled out slow, no plates on the front bracket. I logged the timestamp, pulled a still frame from the cam, and printed it for the binder. Benny bleated from the rail like a judge. I know, I told him. Animal gang activity. Put it in the minutes. I stood there watching him drive off, a profound sense of helplessness washing over me. For the first time, I felt a flicker of doubt. Was I wrong? Had I misread the deed? Did this woman with her clipboard and her confidence know something I didn't? I looked at the orange flags, a garish, insulting line drawn across the life I had built. The deputy's words echoed in my head. Civil matter. It was a bureaucratic shrug, a way of saying, not my problem. And in that moment, I realized I was completely on my own. It was me and my animal gang against an entire HOA, and the law had just officially washed its hands of me. The doubt didn't last long. Stubbornness is a hard habit to break. The deputy's brush-off and Sharon's arrogance lit a fire under me. If this was a civil matter, then I was going to get civil. The first thing I did was call Alex. She did what? He said, his voice crackling over my speakerphone. She just walked onto my land and planted flags like she was claiming it for Spain, I said, pulling weeds from my garden with more force than necessary. The deputy called it a civil matter and left. Of course he did, Alex grumbled. Okay, first things first, you need to document everything. Every letter, every interaction. And you need a lawyer. I know a guy who handles property disputes. He's expensive, but he's a bulldog. My next stop was the Stone River County Clerk's office. It was a dusty, quiet place that smelled like old paper and forgotten history. I spent the entire afternoon hunched over massive, leather-bound plat books, going back decades. And there it was, on a survey map from 1952, long before the HOA was even a glimmer in some developer's eye. My property was clearly marked. The survey notes were detailed, referencing a chiseled granite stone marker at the northwest corner of the shoreline boundary. My heart started beating a little faster. This was real evidence, not just an HOA printout. I got certified copies of the map and the survey notes. Back at the ranch, I took a sledgehammer and some wooden stakes and pounded in a new set of signs right next to Sharon's stupid orange flags. Big, professional-looking signs with bold red letters. Private property. No trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted. It felt good, a small act of defiance. The official violation letters started arriving a few days later, delivered by certified mail. They were full of legal-sounding jargon about covenant violations and daily fines. I filed them neatly in a folder labeled Evidence. I also installed a couple of high-def security cameras, one pointed at my driveway and one covering the entire shoreline and dock. If Sharon was going to send her people back, I wanted a record of it. The confrontation I was half expecting came on a damp Thursday afternoon. A light drizzle had been falling all day, leaving the grass slick and the wooden dock stairs treacherous. I was in the barn trimming one of the goat's hooves when Scout and Willow started barking. They were carrying tools, a crowbar and a heavy-duty bolt cutter. They weren't here to plant flags this time. They were here to follow through on Sharon's threat. They were going to start tearing down my fence. I took a deep breath, told the dogs to stay, and walked to the house. I grabbed two things, my phone and the old wooden baseball bat that leaned in the corner behind the door. I set my cell to record on a porch camera mount and kept the cordless landline for 911. Sharon stepped closer to my mailbox, heels biting the gravel. Mr. Reed, this is official board action. Daily fines start today. $500. Neat number, I said. Is that per flag or per bad idea? The stocky guy popped open the van door and pulled out a pool noodle and a butterfly net, like a beach day gone wrong. He saw my face. It's for animal control, he muttered. For fish? I asked. He flushed. The other guy lifted his polo to show a mall badge with a hologram star. I zoomed the phone. A click. Badge looks fresh, I said. Smells like kiosk. Sharon folded her arms. You're obstructing enforcement. I pointed, slow and clear, at the no trespassing sign. I'm reading. You're trespassing. You going to swing that bat? The bolt cutter guy said. I set the bat on the rail, open palms shown to the camera. No, I'm going to film and use words with small syllables. I didn't grab it to be a hero. I'm not a young man anymore, and these guys were half my age and built like refrigerators. The bat wasn't for swinging. It was a talking stick. It was a clear, non-verbal signal that this conversation was going to be a serious one. I stepped out onto the porch just as they reached the first fence post near the water. I tapped record on the porch camera, steady and wide. The bat stayed low at my side. The camera caught both. I kept the bat low and visible to the camera, but off to my side. Gentlemen, I called out, my voice calm and carrying easily in the quiet air. You are trespassing on private property. I've already told your boss. You can see the signs. I gestured with the bat toward the no trespassing sign, not 10 feet from them. They stopped and looked at me. The stocky one smirked. We're not trespassing. We're performing HOA-sanctioned maintenance on community property. This isn't community property, I said, holding my phone up so they could clearly see it was recording. This is my land. The fence stays. The dock stays. You need to turn around and leave right now. Or what? The other one said, hefting the bolt cutters. You going to hit us with that bat, old man? I didn't rise to the bait. No. I'm going to stand here and film you committing a crime. Then I'm going to call the sheriff and have you arrested. And then my lawyer is going to sue you, your boss, and the entire HOA. So please, make my day. Go ahead and cut that wire. My calmness seemed to unnerve them more than any threat would have. They looked at each other, then back at me. They saw me, a stubborn man, standing his ground. They saw the phone recording their every move. They saw the bat, a clear symbol of my resolve. They hesitated, the arrogance draining from their faces, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. And in that moment of hesitation, the whole situation was about to go sideways in a way none of us could have predicted. The man with the bolt cutters, let's call him Dale, made his decision. He wasn't going to be stared down by some old farrier. He took a step toward the fence, a renewed swagger in his walk. You don't scare us, he said, more to convince himself than me. His partner, Roy, the stocky one with the crowbar, decided on a different approach. He saw the dock stairs as a shortcut, a way to flank me and come up behind the porch. It was a stupid tactical move, but I guess he felt he had to do something. I'll handle him. Roy grunted and started jogging toward the dock. That's when two things happened at once. First, the drizzle that had been falling all day had made the old wooden stairs slick with a fine coat of algae-laced moisture. Second, Roy was wearing smooth-soled work boots, completely unsuitable for the terrain. His first step hit the algaed top stair and shot out like it met ice. He pinwheeled, the crowbar ringing off the rail, breath grunted out. Then, all 200 pounds pinned his shin against the stair edge. The crack was a broomstick over a knee. For a beat, the world held, rain ticking, dog statue still. Then Roy screamed, high and tearing, and collapsed onto the landing with his leg spelled wrong. He went down hard. His full body weight came crashing down on his right leg, which was bent at an unnatural angle against the sharp edge of the second step. The sound was sickeningly loud, a sharp crack that echoed in the damp air. It wasn't a sound you could mistake for anything else. It was the sound of a major bone breaking. Roy screamed, a raw, high-pitched shriek of agony that was completely out of character for his tough guy persona. He crumpled onto the small landing at the bottom of the stairs, clutching his leg, angled wrong. Over by the fence, Dale froze. The bolt cutters clattered to the ground. He stared at his partner, then at me, his face a mask of disbelief and horror. He thought I'd done something, that this was some kind of trap. His brain, already addled with adrenaline and arrogance, short-circuited. He did the only thing it could think of. He turned and ran. He ran blindly away from me, away from the screaming Roy, cutting across the corner of the pasture. This was his second and much more serious mistake. He had forgotten about Samson. My ram had been standing by the barn, 100 feet away, watching the entire drama with a quiet, thoughtful intensity. To Samson, the situation was simple. His human, Nathan, was being threatened by loud, angry men. One of them had yelled and fallen down. Now the other one was running a clear sign of a predator in retreat. And Samson, a 200 pounds creature bred for generations to protect his flock, had a very specific, hardwired protocol for dealing with retreating predators. He lowered his head. His powerful back legs dug into the soft turf. He became a woolly battering ram, a guided missile of muscle and bone. Dale might have heard the thudding of hooves behind him, but he didn't have time to react. Samson hit him square in the back of the left leg, just below the knee. It wasn't a gore-filled, Hollywood-style impact. It was a precise, brutally efficient transfer of energy. All 200 pounds of Samson moving at a full sprint, focused on a single point. Dale's leg folded in a way a leg is not meant to fold. He went down without a sound, his forward momentum carrying him into a clumsy somersault before he landed in a heap on the grass. The whole event, from Roy slipping to Dale getting leveled, took maybe 5 seconds. One moment, I was in a tense standoff. The next, I was looking at two men on the ground, both with severe leg injuries, one self-inflicted and one, well, ram-inflicted. Scout and Willow, who had been sitting silently beside me, hadn't even moved. They just looked from the men to me, as if waiting for their next command. Samson, his duty done, trotted a few feet away, shook his head once, and began calmly grazing as if nothing had happened. I lowered my phone, the recording still running. The scene was exactly as I described it in the cold open. Two men, unable to walk, beginning the long, humiliating crawl back to their van. I wasn't angry. I wasn't triumphant. As an ex-medic, my brain had already shifted gears. The confrontation was over. The emergency was just beginning. I took a steadying breath, pulled out my cordless phone, and dialed 911. This was the call you heard at the start. My mind was already running through the steps for stabilizing two tib-fib fractures. This whole mess had just escalated from a civil matter to a multiple trauma incident, and I knew with absolute certainty that the sheriff was finally going to have to listen to. While I was on the phone with the 911 dispatcher, I walked down and did a quick assessment. Roy, the dock faller, was loud but stable. His pain was immense, but the break, while bad, didn't seem to have broken the skin. Dale, the victim of Samson's defensive maneuver, was quieter, which worried me more. His leg was a mess. Both were classic tib-fib fractures. I did what I could, using sticks from a nearby woodpile and my own belt to fashion a crude splint for Dale, just to immobilize the limb and prevent further damage. I kept them talking, asking them simple questions to monitor their level of shock. What's your name? Who's the current president? Standard medic stuff. They were scared and hurting, their tough guy act completely gone. The wail of a siren grew closer, and soon enough, an ambulance and two sheriff's cruisers pulled down my long driveway. The paramedics took over with professional efficiency, and I stepped back to talk to the sheriff. This wasn't the young deputy from before. This was Sheriff Thompson himself, a tall, weathered man with a reputation for being thorough and fair. He listened, his face unreadable, as I gave him my statement. I explained the ongoing dispute, Sharon's threats, and the events of the afternoon. I handed him my phone. It's all on video, I said. From the moment they stepped on my property. You'll see I never approached them. I never threatened them. I told them they were trespassing and to leave. He took the phone and watched the footage right there, leaning against the hood of his cruiser. He watched Roy threaten me, rush the dock, and slip. He watched Dale turn and run. And he watched a blur of white will enter the frame and intercept him. When he got to the end, he looked up, not at me, but over at Samson, who was still grazing peacefully. Thompson looked back at me, and a tiny smile played on his lips. Mr. Reed, he said, his voice a low rumble. In all my years, I've never logged a two-injury trespass where the ram did the stopping. I prefer to think of it as a preemptive strike by my head of security, I said dryly. But yes, that about sums it up. He didn't laugh, but his eyes crinkled at the corners. We'll take this video into evidence. The two men will be interviewed at the hospital. For now, stay on your property and try to keep your security chief from causing any more diplomatic incidents. As they loaded the men into the ambulance, I felt a knot of anxiety in my stomach. Even though I knew I was in the right, the law can be a tricky thing. I worried I'd crossed a line. How far was too far to defend your own home? That night, a storm rolled in. Not just a drizzle, but a real gully washer. The sky opened up and rain came down in sheets, hammering on my tin roof. Thunder rattled the windows, and lightning lit up the landscape in stark, flashing images. I couldn't sleep. I just sat in my living room watching the storm, the events of the day playing over and over in my head. The storm raged for hours. Around 3 a.m., the rain finally subsided to a steady drizzle. Before it eased, a gust tore a tin flap loose on the goat shed. It banged like a snare drum. The goats scattered. One little horn tip wedged in a panel, and the kid froze, eyes wide. Easy, I said, sliding in on my knees. Lightning stitched the clouds. Scout lay at the gate, still as a post. Willow pressed against the kid's flank, steadying him. I clipped my multi-tool, freed the horn, and palmed the kid's head till his breath slowed. A crack lit the yard. A cedar by the dock split and smoked. I dragged 2 gas cans farther from the barn, tied the flap down with baling wire, and checked Samson. He stood between me and the open yard, head low, guarding. Promotion holds, I told him. Head of security. He snorted once, like he agreed. When the rain finally softened, the place was still. My hands shook, but the herd was whole. The next morning, the air was clean and cool. I went out to check for damage. Willow barked twice her something's loose bark. Down the cove, a kayak had slipped its tie and was drifting towards stumps. A teenager stood on a dock, yelling, "Dad's boat." "Hang on," I called. I clipped a line to a fence ring, whistled the dogs to stay, and pushed my flat skiff off the mud. The little outboard coughed, then caught. The water was brown and fast. I nosed the skiff against the kayak, grabbed its bow loop, and heaved it onto my deck. "Tell your daddy he owes my goats a bag of carrots," I said. The kid laughed, shaky but okay. "Tell him the goats prefer rainbow carrots," I said. The kid blinked. "That's not a thing." "It is now." On the way back, I spotted a drone wedged high in a pine, a red light still blinking. The storm had speared it there like a dart. Back on shore, I hauled out the orchard ladder and climbed slow, boots squeaking. Benny tried to eat my glove. I flicked his ear with a grin. "Not now, Union boss." The prop arms were cracked, but the SD card was intact. I logged the sticker number out loud for my video. Chain of custody. No edits. The lake was high, its surface brown and churning. The sheer volume of water had caused some erosion along the shoreline, washing away a good 2 feet of the bank in one particular spot, the exact spot where Sharon's orange flags marked her imaginary property line. And there, nestled in the freshly exposed mud and rock, was something that made me stop dead in my tracks. It was a block of granite about 2 feet tall, dark and weathered with age. It was almost completely buried, but the storm had washed away the earth from its top corner. And on that corner, deep and clear, despite the decades of being buried, was a chiseled mark. It was a simple cross inside a circle. I scrambled back to the house and grabbed the certified copy of the 1952 survey map I'd gotten from the county clerk. I unrolled it on the hood of my truck, my hands shaking slightly. There, in the surveyor's notes for the northwest corner of my property, was the description: boundary marked by chiseled granite stone, bearing the mark of a cross within a circle. It was real. The proof, the undeniable physical truth of where my land began and ended, had been there all along, buried just beneath the surface. The storm hadn't just brought rain, it had brought clarity. It had washed away the dirt, and, with it, all of my remaining self-doubt. This was no longer just a defense. It was time to go on the attack. Seeing that stone marker changed everything. It was like finding the cornerstone of my entire argument. Literally. The anxiety and defensiveness I'd been feeling were replaced by a cold, methodical resolve. Sharon Vance hadn't just made a mistake. She had lied. This wasn't a simple boundary dispute anymore. It was a deliberate attempt to take my land. I spent the next few days building my case, piece by piece, like a master farrier forging a perfectly balanced horseshoe. My kitchen table became a war room. I called Alex's lawyer friend, a shark named Evan Wright, and laid it all out for him. He was quiet for a long time on the other end of the line, and then he let out a low whistle. "Nathan," he said, "this is an absolute gift. An HOA president making a fraudulent claim, sending unlicensed security to enforce it, resulting in injury, and you have it all on video, plus a newly discovered physical survey marker? This is the kind of case we dream about." He gave me a checklist, and I got to work. First, the evidence. I created a binder, thick and meticulously organized. The first section held the property documents, a certified copy of my deed with the farm use exception highlighted, the 1952 county survey map with the stone marker circled in red, and dozens of high-quality photographs I took of the unearthed stone from every possible angle, including close-ups of the chiseled mark. I even took a photo of me standing next to it, holding that day's newspaper, just to prove when it was discovered. The second section was the video evidence. I downloaded the footage from my security cameras and my phone onto a thumb drive. I edited it into a clear, chronological timeline. It started with Sharon planting the flags. It showed the security van arriving. It captured the entire confrontation, my calm warnings, Roy's slip on the stairs, and Samson's decisive intervention. The audio also caught Sharon saying, "Move him off the dock." I even included a slow-motion replay of Samson's charge, which Evan later called unnecessarily dramatic, but legally compelling. He said the fact that the man was running away from me, deep inside my property line, and toward my barn and other animals, made Samson's actions legally defensible as protecting his territory and flock. He told me to start calling Samson my livestock guardian animal in all official statements. The third section was medical. We obtained the ER reports through court-ordered discovery after the guards filed injury claims against the HOA. They confirmed multiple severe fractures of the tibia and fibula for both men. Crucially, The reports detailed the men's own accounts of what happened. Roy admitted he slipped on some wet steps. Dale stated he was struck by a large animal while running. Their own words backed up my video perfectly. There was no mention of me attacking them. Their story and my story were, incredibly, the same. The ER notes called them displaced tib-fib fractures, broken shins. A printout from the state security licensing portal showed no license for either man or their company. A state game warden rolled up that afternoon. Garcia, all khaki and calm. Got a call about a wild sheep on a dock, she said deadpan. Sampson wandered over, sniffed her sleeve, and stood like a statue. Garcia read the ear tag and smirked. This is a domestic ram with a proper tag. Not wildlife. Not my problem. Appreciate you saying it on camera, I said, tilting my phone. She had my stack of letters. They wrote you up for bleeding and for animal gang activity, I said. Garcia glanced at Scout and Willow, sitting perfect at heel. Yeah, very scary. 2 sit champs and a lawnmower. She signed a quick note. No wildlife violation observed. After she left, I grabbed a phone sound meter. Goats at the fence, 58 dB. Sharon's pool pump across the cove, 72 dB. I printed the screenshots and slid them behind the deed page. It felt petty. It also felt great. My narrative was solidifying. I was the calm property owner defending my land with documentation and cameras. They were the aggressive trespassers whose own carelessness and panic led directly to their injuries. And Sampson was just being a ram. The final section of the binder was for correspondence. I included every threatening letter from Sharon and the HOA, complete with the certified mail receipts. I also wrote a detailed, minute-by-minute account of every interaction I'd had with them, from the first day Sharon showed up to my 911 call. I was transforming my frustration into a weapon of pure, undeniable fact. As I clicked the binder shut, it felt heavy in my hands, heavy with the weight of truth. This was my shield and my sword. I wasn't just the crazy old guy with the attack sheep anymore. I was the man with the evidence. I was ready for the next step, but I couldn't shake a nagging feeling. Why? Why go to all this trouble for a 20-foot strip of shoreline? It seemed personal, excessive. There had to be more to it than Sharon Vance's obsession with beige fences. I called Alex. It doesn't add up, I told him. The risk she's taking, the aggression, it's out of proportion. There's a missing piece. There's always a missing piece when people get this crazy, Alex said. And usually, it has a $sign in front of it. He was right. And as it turned out, that missing piece was about to fall right into our laps, thanks to a bit of digital sleuthing and a very disgruntled cousin. Alex's contribution to my defense went far beyond moral support and lawyer recommendations. It turned out he had a secret weapon. His cousin, a young guy named Josh, who worked as an IT contractor for various businesses around Stone River County. Josh was brilliant with computers but, according to Alex, had the social skills of a dial-up modem. More importantly, he had recently done a network upgrade for a local real estate firm that happened to handle a lot of the HOA's business. I told Alex my theory that this wasn't just about Sharon's power trip, that there had to be money involved. Alex relayed the story to Josh. At first, Josh wasn't interested. He didn't like getting involved in things. But when Alex mentioned that Sharon Vance was the one causing the trouble, Josh's attitude changed. Sharon Vance, he'd said. The HOA lady? She was a nightmare during the network install. Treated me like I was the gum on her shoe. Yeah, I'll take a look. Josh put us in touch with the HOA treasurer, who'd had enough. She gave my lawyer a sworn affidavit and exported emails. Evan subpoenaed the originals from the firm. A day later, Alex called, buzzing. We've got the white. He forwarded me an email chain. It was a PDF file containing dozens of emails and text messages, all exchanged between Sharon Vance's personal email address and a man named Alan Petrov, the principal of a development company called Lakeshore Vistas, LLC. I sat at my kitchen table and read through the messages, my coffee growing cold. The story they told was damning. For months, Sharon and Alan had been planning this. Lakeshore Vistas had quietly bought up a large, non-waterfront parcel of land directly behind my property. Their plan was to build a massive, high-end condominium complex. But they had one major problem: no direct lake access. My 20 acres, specifically my shoreline, was the only thing standing between their multi-million-dollar project and the water. The plan was sickeningly simple. Sharon, using her power as HOA president, would manufacture a boundary dispute. She would claim my shoreline as HOA common area, Since the HOA controlled the common areas, she could then arrange a long-term, very lucrative lease for that shoreline to Lakeshore Vistas, giving them the lake access they desperately needed. The emails laid out the entire conspiracy. They talked about neutralizing the uncooperative homeowner. That was me. They discussed the timeline for reclaiming the common area, stealing my land. And then I got to the financial arrangement. In exchange for her help, Alan Petrov had promised Sharon Vance a 10% finder's fee on the final value of the condo project, a figure that would easily run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. As a bonus, she was also promised the corner penthouse unit in the first building, free and clear. I felt a surge of cold fury. This was never about offense. It wasn't about property values or aesthetics. It was about greed. It was a cold, calculated conspiracy to defraud me of my land for personal profit. My little ranch, my home, was just an obstacle in their path to a payday. This changed the game completely. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was now the victim of a criminal conspiracy. I immediately called Evan, the lawyer. I forwarded him the email chain. He called me back 30 minutes later, his voice sharp with a lawyer's predatory glee. "Nathan, we've got her," he said. "This is wire fraud. It's conspiracy. This goes way beyond an HOA dispute. This is felony territory." He told me to add the printed emails to my binder. The evidence was now overwhelming. We had the property records, the video, the medical reports, and now, the motive. We had the whole ugly story from start to finish. The final piece of the puzzle, however, was the official land survey. Evan filed an emergency motion with the court, presenting our initial evidence. The judge, seeing the potential for serious wrongdoing, immediately granted it. He ordered an official, court-sanctioned survey of my property line to be conducted by a neutral third-party surveyor, and he put it on a rush. 2 days later, a team of professional surveyors arrived. They spent hours with their high-tech equipment. They located the old granite marker, cross-referenced it with the county records, and took precise measurements. The lead surveyor came to my porch to give me the results. He unrolled a fresh blueprint, pointed to a thick black line, and said, "Mr. Reed, according to our findings, this is your legal property line. The old stone was dead on. In fact, your fence is actually 5 feet inside your own property. If anything, you've been giving the HOA 5 feet of your land." The trap was set. The evidence was locked and loaded. All that was left was the showdown. And it was scheduled for the following Tuesday at the monthly HOA board meeting. The Stone River HOA monthly meeting was usually a sleepy affair held in the community clubhouse. A dozen or so retirees would typically show up to complain about lawn ornaments or the speed of the mailman. But not this time. Word had gotten out. The story of the ranch standoff, the security guards, the attack ram, it had all spread like wildfire through the manicured suburbs. When I walked in with Evan, my lawyer, the room was packed. Every seat was taken, and people were standing along the walls. It felt less like a board meeting and more like a public trial. At the front of the room, Sharon Vance sat at a long table with the other board members. She looked composed, dressed in a sharp business suit, but I could see the tension in her jaw. She had to know this meeting was about her. She started by trying to control the narrative. She launched into a prepared speech about a rogue homeowner who was flouting community rules, endangering the neighborhood with aggressive, untamed animals, and making violent threats. She painted me as a menace, a threat to their peaceful, orderly way of life. She played the victim card perfectly, her voice trembling with manufactured outrage. I just sat there, my binder on my lap, and let her talk. I watched the faces in the crowd. Some were nodding along, buying her story completely. Others, like my neighbor Jerry, a nervous little man obsessed with recycling bin placement, looked uncertain. A few people who knew me from my farrier work just looked confused. When she finished, she said, "And so, the board will move to place a lien on Mr. Reed's property for his noncompliance, and to begin legal proceedings to have his dangerous animals removed from our community." A murmur went through the crowd. This was it. Evan stood up. "Madam President," he said, his voice cutting through the chatter, "before you proceed with that illegal course of action, my client and I would like to present some information to the board and the residents." Sharon's eyes narrowed. "This is not the forum for—" "Actually, it is," Evan interrupted smoothly, "especially since it concerns your conduct as president of this association." Before she could object, Evan started. He was brilliant. He laid out the case calmly and logically. He presented the certified copy of my deed, highlighting the farm use exception. He He showed them the 1952 survey map. Then he projected the photos of the chiseled granite marker onto a large screen at the front of the room. This stone, he announced, was recently verified by a court-ordered survey as the official legal boundary marker of my client's property. He put the official survey results up on the screen next, a modern digital map showing my property line exactly where the old stone said it was. As you can see, Evans said, Mr. Reed's fence and dock are not on common ground. They are well within his own property. Therefore, every violation notice, every fine, and every threat you have issued, Madam President, has been based on a fraudulent claim. The mood in the room shifted. People were whispering, looking at Sharon, who was now pale. But Evan wasn't done. Furthermore, he continued, when my client peacefully asserted his legal rights, you dispatched 2 unlicensed individuals to his property to destroy his fence. Individuals who, I might add, are now suing this HOA for workplace injury. He then played the video. The whole room watched in silence as the 2 security guards trespassed, made their threats, and then met their respective fates, one by gravity, the other by Samson. When the clip of Samson hitting the running man played, someone in the back let out an audible gasp, followed by a few nervous chuckles. A hand shot up. So you didn't hit them? A woman asked. No, ma'am. I said into the mic. One slipped on wet stairs. One ran at a ram. A gray beard in a fishing hat stood. I heard 2 cracks from my porch. That would be tibia and fibula, I said. Doctors confirmed. Sharon leaned into her mic. He edited the footage. Evan smiled. Which is why we also have the raw files and the drone card, seized under chain of custody. He held up a labeled bag from the back. My neighbor Hank cupped his hands. Breaker, breaker. Looks like Truth on Channel 9. The room laughed. Even the board lawyer smiled, then tried to hide it. Evan clicked the next slide. The email where Sharon wrote, neutralize the homeowner. The room turned cold. That language is industry shorthand, Sharon stammered. For fraud. Evan asked. Murmurs rolled like wind through reeds. The side door opened. Sheriff Thompson stepped in with 2 deputies. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. We have a search warrant for HOA communications, he said and walked to the board table. Papers slid. Chairs scraped. Someone whispered, my God. The running gag of animal gang activity had become a stunning visual reality. The final blow came next. Now, you might be asking yourselves why, Evans said, turning to face the crowd. Why would a president go to such lengths over a few feet of grass? Why risk a lawsuit? Well, we believe we have the answer. He clicked to the final slide, and there it was, projected for everyone to see. The email chain between Sharon Vance and Alan Petrov of Lakeshore Vistas. He read the most damning lines out loud. The plan to neutralize me. The deal for the penthouse. The 10% finder's fee. The room erupted. People were on their feet, shouting. Sharon was frozen, her face a mask of pure horror. Her carefully constructed world had just been demolished in front of all her neighbors. As deputies executed the warrant, bagging phones and laptops, Sharon's face went slack. They escorted her for questioning. Charges followed after the DA review. As the deputies escorted a stunned and silent Sharon out of the room, the crowd parted for her like the Red Sea. The fight was over. I hadn't just won. I had exposed the truth. And the truth, it turned out, was more powerful than any HOA bylaw. In the weeks that followed the chaotic HOA meeting, the dominoes fell quickly. Sharon Vance was charged with multiple felonies, and the local news had a field day with the story of the corrupt HOA president, the secret developer deal, and the heroic Ram who defended his home. Lakeshore Vistas, LLC abruptly dissolved, and Alan Petrov seemed to have vanished from the state. The lawsuit from the 2 injured guards against the HOA was settled quickly and quietly. I was never even named in it. The HOA itself was in shambles, but good people stepped up. My nervous neighbor, Jerry, surprisingly, was elected interim president. His first official act was to draft a formal public apology to me on behalf of the entire community. His second was to spearhead a new covenant amendment. It wasn't just a recognition of my farm use exception, it was a celebration of it. The amendment officially acknowledged the historical significance of my ranch, confirmed my property lines based on the court-ordered survey, and added a clause protecting any other historical deed properties that might exist within their boundaries. They passed it unanimously. Life on Stone River slowly returned to a new kind of normal. The waves from pontoon boats that passed my dock were friendlier now. People didn't just wave, they'd sometimes shout, Go Samson, or give me a thumbs up. I became less of the weird hermit and more of a local folk hero, a role I was deeply uncomfortable with but tolerated with a quiet nod. I wasn't looking for fame. I was just a man who wanted to be left alone on his own land. I'd answered the question that had been dogging me. How far will a man go to defend his own? The answer was, as far as it takes. You push back with letters, then with signs, then with lawyers. You stand on your porch with a bat you have no intention of swinging, and you trust that the truth when combined with a well-placed security camera and a 200 pounds Ramus enough. A couple of months after the meeting, I was sitting on the edge of my dock, right where it all started. It was a perfect evening. The sun was setting, the sky was a blaze of color, and a gentle breeze was rustling the pines. Scout and Willow were snoozing at my feet, their paws twitching as they chased rabbits in their dreams. The goats were making their soft, bleating sounds in the pasture. I had a cold beer in my hand and a deep sense of peace in my heart. I heard a familiar, heavy tread on the wooden planks behind me. Samson walked up and nudged my elbow with his massive head, a gentle reminder that he was there. His big, curled horns gleamed in the last light of the day. He wasn't a weapon or a security system. He was just part of my family, a creature who had acted on pure, simple instinct to protect his home. I reached over and gave him the chin scratches he was demanding. He leaned into my hand, closing his eyes in contentment. Looking out over the water, I knew I had done more than just win a property dispute. I had protected this little world we'd built. The land was safe. The animals were safe. The quiet was mine again. The orange flags were long gone, replaced by the simple, undeniable truth of an old stone marker and a man's stubborn refusal to be pushed around. The animal gang and I were officially retired. We had won the turf war,